It's a surprise Monday episode.
Surprise Monday. By the way, I mean, Nick Lindsay's going to be apoplectic to find out we're doing it at Monday at 1:30. He's going to lose his mind. It's going to be over.
At this point, I want it to be unpredictable.
Yeah.
I don't want people to know. It goes against all the rules of doing something like this, but
yes.
Frankly, I don't care.
Yeah, we actually do. I will say we do release it on a consistent schedule, which is about 4 to 7 days after the episode comes out as a podcast. That's when we release it. And then as a live stream, you can catch it at any point during the week. Who knows? Who knows when it's coming?
You just never know. And that's the beauty of what we're doing here. I have about 24 hours at home, a little more than 24 hours at home before I leave again. So
yeah,
this is the one day this week where we could make this work.
That's right.
Yes.
By the way, you know what? If you ever are worried about the day that it's coming out, assume that we couldn't make it work any other time, because it's almost certainly the case. We are very busy guys.
No one's very worried, I'm sure.
Yeah. One guy. There's one guy.
To the 3 or 4 of you that are.
There's one.
I guess. I don't know.
It's not 3 or 4. That's generous to ourselves. Yeah. What are you up? What have you been up to, Alex? It's been
it's been a busy week. Yeah, it's been I am after this I am leaving on a plane to Reno, Nevada, where it's like Las Vegas but smaller and older.
It's like Tacoma compared to Seattle.
Yeah, that's probably a fair comparison. Greater distance between the two, but yes, it's constantly living in Vegas's shadow. So
sure.
I'm going there with my dad and my brother. It's my dad's 70th birthday this year. He likes to go to Reno, so we're all going together. And the Rainiers are there, so we're gonna watch some Rainiers baseball.
Very nice.
The weather's supposed to be like 95 degrees every day as a high. So by the time you get to the evening when the baseball's about to start, it'll be perfect. Just perfect baseball weather. So
that's you and I both catching Rainiers road games within a calendar month of each other. That's probably, well, I've never been to a road Rainiers game, but that's an unlikely event to occur twice in a month.
I've only been to Rainiers games in Vegas. I actually kind of like the road games because if you've ever been to a Tacoma Rainiers game in Tacoma, you know that it actually gets pretty busy there.
Sure.
And so you generally have to sit in your assigned seat, which is weird for a minor league baseball game. I mean, typically the minor league baseball experience is you just walk in the door and do whatever the hell you want and sit wherever you want. And, no one seems to care, but it's a little different at Cheney Stadium, which is great. Good for them. Like they sell good tickets for their games. So the road experience in other places has been nice. You can really get up next to the field.
Did I tell my Gabriel Rutledge wearing a Comedy Cellar shirt story last week?
I don't believe you did.
Okay, so I'm sorry if I did already, but so Gabe and I, we had a night off. You know, Gabe. You
did mention that you went to the game on the last podcast.
So greatest comic in the Northwest, Gabe Rutledge, by far. Friend of mine. We work together a decent amount, and we go out to despite being the greatest comic in the Pacific Northwest, he's not good enough to stop Mike Epps from performing on a Saturday at Bricktown Comedy Club. So we had an unexpected night off. We got scheduled on this like a couple months ago, and then unexpected Saturday off on the road. Never happened before. Hopefully never happens again in my career, but I decided to make the most of it. It's where I got the Buc-ee's. I took a trip down to Dallas that very same day and then came back to the hotel in time for Gabe and I to attend this Rainiers game. And Gabe is wearing a Comedy Cellar shirt. And we're walking through in this big fucking country Oklahoman dude, like 6'5", probably 350, but like bit tall enough that 350 just makes him look like an offensive lineman and not like a gamer, And he goes, "Who'd you see at the Comedy Cellar?" And Gabe's like, "What?" And there's a thing about being a comedian, by the way, when you're among people who are not comics. It sucks to tell them that you're comics because it always invites a conversation that's longer than you want it to be.
Sure.
And so he's trying really hard. He's like, "I've seen a lot of people." He's like, "No, give me one name." He's like, "Dude, can't pick one. Seen too many people." Gabe performs at the Comedy Cellar. That's where he got the shirt. And finally, the guy's like, "Got to tell me one comic. Who's the best comic?" I go, "You got to see this guy, Gabriel Rutledge." And this guy has no idea.
For two comics, this was already drawing out too far.
And I go, "You got to see this guy, Gabriel Rutledge. He's the man. Look him up when you get home." And if you don't, I mean, Gabe has a pretty particular look. So there's a part of this that's just a joke that we'll never get to see the punchline of, which is this dude looks him up and goes, "Oh fuck, that was the guy I was talking to. I was talking to this comedian right at that moment."
We'll see if he ever looks it up. Maybe he'll come
Yeah.
out to a show. You know, who knows?
I did have an Uber driver on my way back from that trip who was like, I did tell I was a comedian because I couldn't think fast enough of a job to lie about.
Yeah.
And I was like, he's like, I'm gonna watch your special. I'm like, if you do it, you comment, you let me know. And he has not commented. So
None of those. Yeah.
third
It was-
episode straight, got to turn the camera off for just a moment, but go ahead, I'm still listening.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate it when you listen to me. That's the only reason I'm here, frankly. Yeah, big weekend for me though. We had our annual golf tournament. A mutual friend of ours, Matt Holt, the Matt Holt Invitational.
Yeah.
This is like our 11th year doing it, and it gets I would say it gets increasingly bigger and drunker as the years go by.
I intentionally created a child so I would never have to golf in this thing. I don't think I got an invite to the Matt Holt Invitational this year, an official invite. I do feel like I have something of an open invite.
Well, I will say there's always, for people like single people who might want to be a part of it, there's always the last minute frantic invite open to all when someone bails. That happens that happened this year. We were supposed to have 28 people. Somebody fell through at the last second. We actually ended up golfing with 27, which is fine. It just means one team was a team of 3 instead of a team of 4. But yeah, it was. It started out very inauspicious many years ago at a Tukwila Municipal Golf Course, Foster Golf Links. For those familiar.
Oh, I love Foster.
Yeah, very small. Not really a tournament type course. It's barely bigger than like a 18-hole par 3. So we started there, and we've moved up over the years. And when we golfed Apple Tree Golf Course in Yakima, if you've never been to Apple Tree Golf Course, pretty cool. A lot of people who do golf know it for its island green. It's like it got an apple-shaped island green on hole number 17, which is pretty cool. It goes through the apple orchards there too, which is neat. And but yeah, Yakima this time of year, boy, Eastern Washington this time of year, not kind to golfers who also imbibe. It is, it was 100 degrees, which is expected in Eastern Washington. But there was also fire smoke that kind of settles into the Yakima Valley there. And it basically just created this cloud layer over the top that trapped all the heat in. So it was just the bigger dudes. There's some bigger dudes in this thing, some of whom you might know. And by the end of the round, they were laboring. And,
yeah, I believe it. I know some of these dudes, and I'm not surprised to find out they were struggling through.
Yeah, and that's with carts. Yeah. So I mean, it was not a kind day to.
No, one of these guys I've golfed with, where with a power cart, I assume one of the guys, the guy you and I are both thinking of, who we golfed with a power cart. He quit after 15 holes. I will say I've also walked 9 holes with him, and he complained the whole time, but he did make it through, and then he quit after 15 holes. So. Is this a scramble tournament? Individual scores?
No, we basically play an individual winner, and we play an individual net winner. So whoever has the best score against their handicap, and then we do a team. So whichever group of 4 performs the best score wise, wins as well. So I've won the team championship in the past. We've had some very prestigious Seattle sports media people, I guess, participate in the past.
Has this tournament reached a point where you're starting to get like part of it subsidized by like sponsorship? Okay.
See, here's the thing about golf tournaments in general. When you tell people who don't really golf that you're in a tournament, they assume you're really good. They're like, oh wow, you're in a tournament. Wow, that's cool. And I think like even most novice golfers, like most municipal course golfers, a lot of people probably never golfed in a tournament in their life. So when they hear tournament, again, they assume everybody must be good. No, this started out as a bunch of friends who wanted to get together and have an excuse to golf once a year, right? Like we golf other times, but all together one time a year. And it's gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. More people have come, and we have a trophy now. It's pretty cool. But yeah, it's gotten to be where like friends of friends of friends get invited to this thing. So it's pretty cool to see because we're just there to have a great time. And yeah, by the end of it, I know that because it was a destination, all of us were staying overnight there. And I did see 3 people puke that night, so that was not good. These are grown ass men.
Yes.
just
It's
embarrassing
nice to see a guy in
themselves.
his 40s vomit on himself because of overconsumption
I
of
almost
alcohol.
got puked on by the
Hell
oldest,
yeah.
one of the oldest guys there, who at about 11 p.m. stood up, put his hand on my shoulder. It's never good at that time of night when another dude puts their hand on your shoulder, because you're like, oh god, if you're balancing on me, that's
There's
bad.
one of two things coming: a sincere conversation or vomit. Either way, I don't
I
want
was
to be a
like,
part of it.
dude, go, please go to the bathroom. Just get away from me. The last thing I want is to be puked on to end my night. I've been up since like 5 a.m. because we had to drive over there in the morning. So that was it was fun. We had a good time. We went to a few bars in Yakima. One of our bartenders was like, you need to go to this one bar, the Sports Center. And I'm sure people from Eastern Washington know the Sports Center. He's like, you're going to see some of Yakima's finest women in that bar. And I guess that's what we saw. It was really hard to say, but yeah, that's what we saw. But it was fun. We had a great time. Very odd thing that happened is that we've been golfing with this guy for like 3 years. He finally wins it this year. He's kind of a friend of a friend. Turns out he's Jack Westover's brother. So that was weird. Yeah. So Husky legend, now current Seahawk, Jack Westover.
Yes, future Seahawks legend Jack Westover.
He did say this is the one thing he has over his brother, is the championship in this very prestigious golf tournament. So suck on that, Jack, I guess.
Fuck you, Jack Westover. We got to get Jack on the pod. And then he'll have that back. He'll have one up on his brother once again as an appearance on the Poor Sports podcast.
Yeah, I don't know. His brother's a cool guy. He might be more interesting. You know, usually like NFL players, NBA players, any kind of pro athlete, not that interesting to talk to. This is actually, for sports radio, this is my least favorite time of year, because all the sports radio stations go out to Seahawks training camp and they all interview players, and it is the most worthless fucking radio. Now, I'm sure there are like Super 12s out there that love to hear from Draymond Jones. You know, like that's the highlight of their week, hearing how camp is different this year and how Draymond's offseason went. Man, I hate that shit, because, you know, the thing about pro athletes, if you've ever crossed paths with a pro athlete over the years, they're generally pretty uninteresting, because their entire lives are focused on professional athletics and being the best athlete they can be. They don't really do anything that fun. So yeah, they don't really have much to say either. And at this point, they're all pre-programmed to, like, you know, the publicists have got to them and said, hey, you gotta say the right things. So,
yeah, I do feel like
it's
funny, because I think we've crested peak, like, cliches, no content, athlete. And now that athletes have podcasts, we're like coming back down the hill where it's like, there are guys who are interesting, maybe, but they have no incentive to give that to a journalist when they could do it on their own podcast. You know what I mean? Like, they have their own outlets.
No, I get it. I mean, there are some athlete podcasts out there that have like taken off and are like actually pretty interesting, but, you know, it seems like the MO is usually inside joke with whoever they're talking to.
Sure.
Not going to reveal the full details of whatever crazy story they have. And who even knows if the story they have is that crazy? You know, it's like they've lived their whole lives in a bubble, and now they're finally out of that bubble and they're trying to be relevant to other people. And it's like, yeah, but like, if you're not going to tell us all the details, then what's the whole point of this? You know, like if you know whose podcast I would listen to, John Moffat, that crazy motherfucker, you know, peeing all over Bellevue when he was a Seahawk. I want to hear about all the places John Moffat peed.
I think that John Moffat, unfortunately, has like a Bam Margera-like story, probably, where it's like, maybe he would have been interesting, but it's reached a point where chances are whatever's left of that story is not super, it's not fun-loving and youthful mischief. It's sad drug addiction, or at least, I mean, maybe not drug addiction, but drug abuse. And then, I mean, he's like off social media. I was a big fan of John Moffat. I thought he was he was one of the few actually funny guys. Remember that the Real Rob report? Mike Robinson would go would go through the locker room when he was a fullback for the Seahawks and just interview. I mean, Russell Wilson, Marshawn Lynch, John Moffat. These are like stars of that show, and I would watch it every episode. I watched every single episode, and you were like, John Moffat is going to have he tried to do stand-up, which probably went poorly, but I think he probably would have had a good podcast back then if athlete podcasts were a thing. I will tell you this, by the way. I had many years ago an old podcast of mine. We had John Ryan on. He came to my house, drank beer. Yes. I mean, got like
everybody said John Ryan. I've had
I think I was
random
the first, by the
podcasts
way.
I did.
I think I was
Yeah.
the first
Yeah.
because he drove all the way down to Tacoma, where he's like drinking beer in my dining room of that apartment I used to live in, and then he had his own podcast for like 2 seasons. And the first season it was like a little wild, and the Seahawks kind of reined it in.
Dialed it back. Yeah.
And they did one live episode at Tacoma Comedy Club, and I did the live recording of it. I wasn't a guest. There actually might have, I think Andrew Rivers was a guest, but he was the only guest, but I was doing just the audio recording. And I remember the whole time just watching this podcast going like, I've listened to this podcast a couple times. I don't know what part of this is actually going to see an MP3 on the internet. It feels like they're going to have to edit. Like nothing will
editing.
be able to survive an edit
Yeah.
because it either refers back to something that was inappropriate, or the only interesting part is the crazy inappropriate. And then it just never. I sent it to them. I sent it to the Seahawks also. Never saw the light of day. In fact, were I a more vengeful person, I could probably
put it
trudge
out
this back up and put it. I have a couple of podcast episodes that I've done like with people where I'm like, they never got released for a variety of reasons. Never because they were like so horrible or I hate the person or whatever. But I'm like, I should start putting this shit out like just on my own. Who cares at this point?
It's like a blooper reel at the end of any TV show.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know what I think would be a very interesting, it could be a podcast, it could be a series of articles, whatever. Tracking down either athletes or just kind of like people in general that are like well known, that were like really well known on social media and just disappeared. A few years ago, Jeff Perlman went after trying to find Sports by Brooks. Remember Sports by Brooks, that Twitter account?
Yeah.
And he kind of found him, and then there was like this whole. They ended up scrapping the story because what they basically found is that they thought Brooks might have some sort of mental illness, and that's kind of why he disappeared. And he's actually still kind of around. He kind of resurfaced a couple years ago, and he just retweets a bunch of stuff now. Brooks does. But one guy I was thinking of specifically, who I really want to know where he is former Seahawk Mike Williams, because that guy in the infancy of Twitter was like every day was posting 10 times a day, just random things. And I always thought he was really funny. Like it wasn't just like, sometimes athletes will post just boring shit about like, here I am at the gym or whatever. But Mike was like posting stuff about random shit he'd be doing. And it was always entertaining. And then he just, as soon as the Seahawks career was done, he just disappeared. He disappeared from football. He disappeared from social media. And I want to know where that guy is. Like someone go track that guy down.
My favorite Mike Williams tweet was when the Seahawks drafted Bruce Irvin. It was something along the lines of, ooh, look at that guy's face. That boy's a dog. Like basically saying he's ugly, which made me laugh so much. Like his soon-to-be teammate is like ugly oh man. Maybe I'll track down the exact. I wonder if I can find this, but I agree. Mike Williams would be a good one. This is kind of why I did the episode with David Ardsma, and David Ardsma has not fallen off a deep end or fallen off of social media, but I do think there is. I have an appetite at least, and maybe other people do, for the guys that you forgot about, or to some degree forgot about, that like were part of your life. A guy that would have been a good version of this that now is like prominent in Seattle media is Bucky Jacobson, a guy who was just like kind of a guy from North Bend who stuck around the minors long enough to have an absolutely brilliant stretch of a couple months, and then was just never seen from in professional baseball again. Yeah. And for I think maybe he had a couple injuries. The Mariners had, I believe, Edgar Martinez still in the system or still on the team at the time. So it was like there wasn't an obvious spot for Bucky. But a guy who like really went up, peaked, and never came back. That's a very interesting story. And I'm sure he's told it many times. Also a guy, by the way, I'll tell a Bucky Jacobson story real quick that I don't think is too disparaging. I was probably 22 years old. I went to Rumble at the Ridge at Snoqualmie Casino, which is a place that any North Bend celebrity couldn't avoid, I'm sure. And I was like, oh shit, that's Bucky Jacobson. And now I will say, Bucky Jacobson seems to be well known at Snoqualmie Casino. But among these like MMA fans, I'm not an MMA fan. I was there with a buddy. I enjoyed the fight. I'm not trying to talk shit. Don't beat me up, MMA people. But I was like, oh shit, that's Bucky Jacobson. And he's like, I am Bucky Jacobson. I'm like, let me buy you a drink. And he went from drinking like Smirnoff vodka to Grey Goose vodka the moment I was paying for it, which made me laugh really hard. It's like a 22-year-old guy wants to buy you a drink and you gotta dump top shelf vodka onto his bill.
Yeah, you got to take advantage of the free drinks when you can.
That's right.
I absolutely would. Yeah, no, I think that the just chasing down guys like that is interesting to me and funny. I mean, like the early days of Twitter. I mean, I remember like before, Team PR had to worry about social media. It was probably like 2 or 3 years of Twitter before they really kind of like started thinking about how to handle these guys on social media. I remember Russell Wilson one time tweeting about how much he loved Chipotle burritos. Just like, can you imagine him doing that now? There's no fucking way. Like, unless Chipotle gave him a sponsorship, but it was just him talking about how much he loved to go to Chipotle and really loved to eat a burrito. And he did it a couple times a day. And I was like, man, that's some real shit that people can relate to. And then all these guys, every single like celebrity or athlete, just, around about 2015 or so, they really shut that shit down and became buttoned up. And it's like, we had so much fun back in the day. Can't we go back to that?
I have to imagine they started writing shit like that, like social media ethics into contracts, because it really did get shut down all the way around, and it's just so much less interesting now.
It is. Now they have to rely on us. And look at it. We don't have anything interesting to talk about. We just try really hard.
I know. I will say we talked with two things. It's going to be a shorter episode today for a couple reasons. One is Alex has he's got to dial up prostitutes in Reno for his trip there, and he's they don't dial themselves. Also, just not a lot. I think we're like in finally the actual like doldrums of, we're like midsummer baseball. The Olympics are going on. I'm going to tell you a couple things. Tell me if they do anything for you as a topic at all. Chase Buttinger is a beach volleyball player. Does this mean anything to you? Do you care about that?
Yeah, I mean, as a huge Pac-12 basketball fan, I watched him play at Arizona in college, and then it goes on to the NBA. But yeah, it's a cool story. I think anytime you have like a two-sport athlete like that, it's a wild story.
Was he like a high-level volleyball player in college, or is this something that we could start to see like post-career guys that like Chase Buttinger? Was like pretty high first round pick, right? But like never really had any stretch of success in the NBA.
No, I distinctly remember when he was playing for Arizona, they talked about how he was one of the best high school volleyball players in the country.
Okay,
I think he's from California, where they actually have men's high school volleyball.
Yeah,
and he had like a legit choice. Like he could go play basketball or he could go play volleyball, and no offense to volleyball players, but it doesn't pay the bills like the NBA does. So he made the right call. I mean, it's crazy to think that, it's been a while since that guy was even in the NBA. And then to resurface, mid 30s, basically as a high level pro athlete who, is still in contention for a medal in the Olympics. That's pretty cool, man. Like just to be able to say you can do that is pretty awesome.
It does make you wonder. I mean, and like, what's the lady's name? Is it Lolo Jones? The
track
she was
athlete.
a track athlete that was dating Tim Tebow briefly, and like a noted mid-30s, early 40s virgin. Yeah. And she just like was like, one year she's like, I'm just gonna do bobsled, and it makes you wonder, like, if you're a great athlete, how many Olympic sports could you just go, yeah, I'll do that in a year and a half. Like, give me a year and a half to train for that, I could do that,
Lolo, for fans of the reality TV show The Challenge on MTV, they know Lolo Jones is they know her differently than maybe people the Olympic fans do. She's a little weird, man. She actually decided to join this game. First they would do this kind of off-season show with The Challenge called pros versus, I don't know, champs versus stars or something.
Oh, this isn't the MTV Road Rules?
It's the Real World Road Rules Challenge originally 25 years ago, but now it's just called The Challenge. But they would do this version where they would bring celebrities in to compete against like the best players from the Challenge and all the games that they play. And she was originally one of those. That's how she got into this Challenge family. Then one year they actually had her join the cast of The Real Challenge. Wow. So just think about like if you've never watched The Challenge, you probably know about The Real World, and that's the type of reality TV people we're dealing with here, except they're competing in physical activity all the time. It's just a physical competition with a very hefty prize at the end for the winner. So she decides to compete, and these people just savagely destroyed her from a mental perspective. I mean, she was just a complete outcast in the house, kind of a weirdo because it's like she just doesn't have social skills like most normal people
Well,
do.
she also
Because
doesn't do like she doesn't like drink or fuck, right? Like this is a very notable
that's
thing
that's
about
a big
her.
part of reality TV. Is
Yeah,
drinking. Everybody knows if you just make a show about drinking and fucking, people are going to watch. She
yeah.
doesn't do those things. So yeah, she was. Yeah. Anyway, my one Lolo show.
Wow.
Yeah.
So and then like what? Shakari Richardson takes silver. Well, one thing about that is Shakari Richardson obviously was, and I think we might have been doing the podcast. I guess maybe not. Maybe I was doing a different. I mean, she got like held out of the last Olympics because of she had like a positive weed test, which at the time I must have been doing a different podcast because obviously it wouldn't have been 4 years ago that you and I were doing this podcast. She takes silver and that was like a big upset. You do kind of wonder, like she's got a particular look, like not a very streamlined look, and you go like these contests are decided.
She's
But
very small. Like
yeah,
I was
but I'm saying
shocked to
like
find that out.
she's got like a lot of we got like fingernails and eyelashes and all kinds of shit that like other runners don't do. And
I mean, it was like a staple of like FloJo and Jackie Joyner Kersey, all of those runners back in the day. So
but these things are decided by hundredths of a second, and you always got to wonder, just like if even if there wasn't any focus on it, like what if could she have been? But whatever. I mean, first off, just happy she's still competing. And the weed thing was like complete bullshit, and she definitely should not have been held out of the Olympics because she smoked a little bit of weed.
Yeah. Did you see the French pole vaulter? Did you see the thing about the French
guy's big fat cock knocking the pole off? Is that
what would you rather have? Would you rather have an Olympic gold medal, or would you rather have the entire world know you have a huge penis? I think I'd probably forego the medal.
Yeah, I think so too. I think so. And then Simone Biles remains very good. I feel like the basket can we like we have over. I would rather see the Olympics be non-pro basketball players at this point. Like I'm over the now everyone have to agree to it. It would mean that we like the stars of other countries don't get to show up, and that's maybe sad for the rest of the teams that are in the Olympics. But it's like at this point, it's like we just want to see. I don't want to watch the U.S. team play. I just want to know that they won a gold. It's not a compelling. Even like the only compelling thing is if they lose, and I don't want to watch the basketball teams lose.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really. The thing about the Olympics is, if you're watching it for just the basketball, which I know there are people that do that because like
Sure.
I follow enough people on Twitter. When a USA basketball game kicks out, they treat it like the NBA, which okay, that's fine. It's like it is like watching like an NBA All-Star team play, so that's kind of cool. Yeah, I mean the storylines out of those games are usually just like who got minutes and who didn't. Like I watched a game the other day where they're playing Serbia, and Serbia is like they're definitely one of the teams that's going to contend with US for a gold.
Sure.
And they didn't play Jason Tatum, and that was the story of the game. I mean, UW wins, or not UW, USA wins by 30 points or whatever, and the story is Jason Tatum didn't get to play. Like that's not what the Olympics are about. I mean, I think, and it's the same thing. Like over the weekend they had Olympics golf, right? And Scotty Scheffler wins gold, which is kind of cool. It's like if you're a golfer who's come out to play in the Olympics, you're basically it's the only time in your life you're not playing for money. Right, these guys are always playing for money, and it's like you're either going to win one of 3 medals or you're just wasting your time effectively by being here. And so it's like for sports like that, where you're dealing with these pro athletes, it's just not the same. I don't watch the Olympics for that. I mean, I remember I was watching a swimming event a few days ago, and like the guy who finished 4th or 5th immediately starts sobbing in the pool. And then he gets out of the pool and he's sitting on the edge of the pool, just sobbing uncontrollably because it was over. It's crazy to think that you spent 4 years training for this one thing.
Well, I mean, yeah, your whole life, really.
Not your whole life, yeah. And then 4 years in between each Olympics, and then you finish, and it was like literally a fraction of a second separated him from being a medalist, right? And it's over for him. And it's like, that's what I like watching the Olympics for. And I like watching all the random sports like handball, stuff like that. I watched some kayak slalom the other day. It was cool to watch for like the first 5 minutes. I mean, that's the thing about the Olympics. It's all like, it's you watch every event for like 5 minutes, you're like, wow, that's cool, and then you see somebody else, it keeps repeating itself, and you're like, okay, I don't need to watch it anymore.
Yeah.
I get it. I get the point now. It's cool to see once.
Yeah, I watched a little bit of handball, and I was like, I'm glad this sport is not popular. This is like unwatchable as a sport. It's
You
like
don't think
the
it's
team
wild? Oh, I
handball.
love
The
it.
team
I love
handball? Is that what
Yeah,
you're talking
team
about?
handball,
Yeah, no,
yeah.
that stinks. You're crazy.
Dude, here's the thing about handball. Every time I watch it, though, I'm like, man, I wish we would have had handball here. Like, I wish handball had been popular in America, because I feel like I could have been at least a varsity handball athlete. I'm like, I can throw the ball really hard. I know the base. I know, like, I like playing basketball, and that's on the same surface, basically. Similar idea as basketball, except you're just chucking a ball. Although it'd be cool if it was like as hard as like a baseball, because then people can't just throw themselves in front of this ball.
That's what. Everything is just like a variation of baseball, lacrosse, and soccer, and you're like, oh, different sport because we use our hands. It's all just the same shit. It's all the same. All right, so if we can, if you could break yourself away from Olympics talk, you have one big topic that I think we could spend a fair amount of time on, because I think it's possible that it's going to be an argument in the next coming months. But I want to go over the early returns on Mariners trade deadline acquisitions, because been mostly pretty good so far. The two relievers, Yimi Garcia and JT Chagua, like short-term stats on relievers is just not going to be very reliable anyway. I mean, short-term stats, the amount of time we're talking is like less than a week. On maybe Rosarena might have been around here for a week. Justin Turner is not quite a week yet. That's short already, but like also 1 inning relievers in that same period of time where they maybe have 3 appearances. It's not gonna. But so those guys have been like wishy-washy. I think like the underlying stuff doesn't look great, but they're gonna be what they're gonna be. I don't think there's any reason to be worried if you are worried, or to be particularly excited based on the stats they've put up.
Well, Garcia is interesting because I feel like they have already used him a lot. You know, even just in 1 week's time, they've gone to him quite a bit, always in leverage situations, which you knew he was going to be.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, I mean,
5 games already as a Mariner.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, what have they played? Like 6 games? I mean, he's basically been used in almost every game that he's been here so far. And yeah, I mean, that's high usage. And it's not like they were going to, when Ryan Stanek was here prior to the deadline, they weren't going to Stanek in every single leverage situation because they didn't trust him that much. They were just trying to bridge that gap between their starters and getting to Andres Munoz. And now they truly have a dependable option to bridge that gap in Garcia. And granted, I mean, a mixed bag of results so far, but just the fact that they trust this guy, can depend on him a little bit more than some of the guys they had there before. That's nice to see.
Yeah. And Chagua has he's appeared in 2 games. He has yet to give up a run as a Mariner. Like I said, the underlying stuff isn't as great, but it's whatever. That's, again, these guys, it's impossible to judge those guys on that period of time. I will say, I mean, Justin Turner has the game with the grand slam, and he's put up decent numbers overall. 119 WRC plus. 0 walks, by the way, so far in 19 plate appearances, which is kind of interesting.
He's a hitter, man. I mean, that's the thing about both Arozarena and Turner. If you've watched every Mariners game or most of the Mariners games so far this year, there are very few guys in that lineup that get up to the plate looking like they're ready to hit. Like, because this philosophy has been take pitches, it almost feels like they're always on their heels in the batter's box. And you just notice a huge difference when Turner and Arozarena get up there. They get up there and they are immediately looking for a pitch to hit. They're not afraid to go after the first pitch. They just look like they want to hit. Whereas most of the guys in this lineup don't necessarily look like they want to hit. They look like me in Little League, terrified of the ball hitting them, and they just don't want to be in the batter's box or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, it's such a big change.
So 119 WRC plus, a little better than his season average so far, right like at the bottom end of his career. Still better than what the Mariners were rolling out with Ty France. Boring move, but like I think it's probably going to be somewhat successful, and the early returns are good. And Arozarena has been very exciting. I mean, I think that's like, I think we've seen like he got picked off the other day. You and I talked last week about a ball that he beat out, but like didn't run hard. Like he's got the like And I've actually heard a lot of references to him playing bad defense. And
Yeah, it's true. He's not a great defender, but he's
well,
fine.
what
He's
I will
adequate.
say is like the statistics don't really bear out that he is a bad defender. Let me I'm verifying them because I looked him up at the day of. They don't really bear out that he's a bad defender, but they don't. I would say like he makes average look terrible. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
in the same
yeah,
way
yeah.
in the same way that like maybe late in his career in Seattle, Ken Griffey Jr. probably made average look really good because he's so smooth and such an amazing athlete. Robinson Cano is another great example. A guy that just looked really good playing average defense and kind of fooled you into thinking he was a great defender.
Yeah.
Randy Rosarena looks really bad, and his athletic ability makes up for. Remember that dude that the Mariners had named, was it James Jones? He was a
Oh yeah,
outfielder,
yeah. The outfielder pitcher. Yeah, turned into a
pitcher. Yeah, turned into a pitcher. He pitched at whatever, like Long Beach, or not Long Beach State, but Long Island State or something like that. He was
Yeah, he actually got back with the. I think he made it back to the majors with the Rangers as a pitcher. Very
I thought we looked
briefly.
this up already. I don't think he made it back, but either way,
Yeah.
he was just incredibly fast, and you could see it on the base paths. It was like Ryan Bliss-esque, where you just see this guy. You're like, yeah, he could steal any base he wants, pretty
Yeah.
much.
Yeah.
And then in the outfield, he was an absolute disaster. But people would, for a long time, almost couldn't bring themselves to say this guy that ran really fast was a disaster in the outfield because even when he made a bad read, he could make up for it a lot of times with just blinding speed.
I mean, that's a common thing. It's like, and Arozarena's that way. He's got plus speed. You know, I think
Mhm.
he's got close to 20 bags this year, doesn't he? And so when you see a guy who's fast, you just assume if he's an outfielder that he's a good defender because you know he can cover a lot of ground. But yeah, I mean, Arozarena, I would say in general, probably what holds him back on defense is he seems to have a general disinterest in it, which which is kind of like, I mean, there's a lot of, it doesn't matter what the sport is. I mean, I guess it does. You know, you can't, if you're a football defensive player, you can't really have a disinterest in defense unless you're like Jamal Adams, I guess,
Sure.
and then you can. But like basketball, you see a lot
you
of
don't have your offense to offset it then either.
right. Like basketball, you have a lot of great players who, you know, James Harden comes to mind, general disinterest in defense. Well, Rosarena is a really good hitter. So, you know, if he wants to be disinterested in defense, he kind of can be because he's still going to get in the lineup because of his bat every day. So, I mean, I understand. I think he's I think his speed makes up for a lot of his deficiencies, which is
Yeah,
always helpful. It's not like you're putting Raul Ibanez out there who couldn't like read a fly ball hit
sure.
directly at him. You know, it's quite
Well,
a bit
and
different.
was slow.
Yeah, I know he wasn't fast, and then he had trouble
Yeah.
reading the ball. It was like the perfect storm of bad defensive. But like, you know, with the Rosarena, at least he's going to get to more balls than a lot of guys would, just because he's fast. But yeah, in general, I would say Turner and Rosarena have been everything that you would have wanted them to be when the Mariners acquired them. You know, it couldn't have gone any better for Justin Turner. His home debut comes up with, you know, that inning, that second inning on Friday's game was it was a wild inning. I mean, you got the Luke Raley home run that I've never seen a ball hit harder and higher. You know, like
Yeah.
there's been a few guys that have hit balls into the right field upper deck at T-Mobile Park, but usually they're majestic moonshots that scale that third level.
Well, and are maybe a little closer to the foul pole. I mean, that was like power alley.
Rayleigh's was like a line drive that kept climbing. It looked like it was going to like hit the cafe, and then it just kept rising. And you thought, okay, maybe it'll go into the suites above the cafe, and then it goes and it hit the guy sitting in the front row in the 300 level. He's kind of all by himself up there. There's a couple other people around him, but he's just sitting there by himself. And the thing like drills him. It looked like it drilled him in the belly because he was so surprised, probably so surprised that the ball even came up there. He's like, probably eating his chicken strips, and all of a sudden there's a ball flying at him, and it's on a line 115 miles an hour off.
Well, it's also in a particularly sunny part of the ballpark where you just probably can't see it very well anyway, and then just gets blasted by it. And did you see the video of Justin Turner later in the same inning? Justin Turner hits a grand slam, and that hit a guy right in the face out behind the bullpen. So
I mean, to the Mariners fans, like in their credit, like no one's expecting that many home runs from the Mariners. I mean, it was just like fans are not prepared for that level of offense. And yeah, it was cool to see, though. It was like the best possible home debut he could have had. And, you know, you're already seeing these guys make a difference. It just lengthens the lineup. And they're doing this without J.P. Crawford and Julio, who have been two of their most dependable offensive players for the last couple seasons. So to be able to, still continue winning games, overcoming those big injuries, and being able to rely on some professional hitters who have been in the middle of a lineup and in the middle of a pennant race before. That's a luxury at this point. So, even though the Mariners maybe didn't do everything we wanted them to do at the deadline, the guys that they have acquired have helped out immediately.
So state of the team is we're going to talk about one more thing with the Mariners before we play the home run game, but state of the team is they're up by 1 game over the Astros, 2 in the win column. I will say the Astros, Yusei Kikuchi went out and put up like 13 strikeouts in 5 2/3 innings, including at one point 9 straight batters. He did exactly what I thought he might do. I haven't even taken the time to look at spin rates yet. It's just my nightmares are confirmed on what Kikuchi's going to become. And I think you and I at some point this season should put a wager on whether or not he re-signs in Houston after you disparaged the city of Houston and gave credit to Toronto for being very Japanese, despite having a very small, comparable to Houston's Japanese population. I guess you feel like I feel the same way. Part of this is I've become a sports fan that's a little more pragmatic, and I don't get like up and down emotionally all that much. But also, like, this team has been everything that I think you and I both said they would be. This is like a barely above average team, and the way they've gotten to barely above average has made you emotional because they've been very good through stretches. They've won a lot of games through stretches, and they've lost a lot of games through stretches. But they where we've leveled out as this is an above average team that is probably going to be about above average. They got a 56% chance or something like that to make the playoffs. I'd be stoked to see them make the playoffs, and I'm also not going to be crushed if they don't, because I just don't think this is a team that's good enough to be like that emotional about them missing the playoffs. But early returns early returns on those players are promising, and you just got to hope. The thing I'm the most worried about the rest of the season, and the thing that I'll be looking at the most, is Cal Raleigh remaining healthy, because I think they still are they're just going to burn that guy out, and it's not even just getting him through September, right? It's like, then what's left of him in October if you do make the playoffs?
Yeah, I guess the one thing I'd say about Cal Raleigh is, for all the fans that are like clamoring for this team to re-sign him, like, I understand the emotional part of it. Like, of course, this guy is the heart and soul of your team. He's the emotional leader. Sure. He's the guy that posts every day. He shows up and plays. And I mean, you watch him take a beating and he still plays through it. Of course you want this guy to be signed forever as a Mariner, but he still has like 4 years left of club control.
Sure.
And the way that they're using him right now, I just can't imagine in 4 years, when he's, 31, 32, whatever he is, that he's going to be in the best shape, unless they really start managing his work. Usually with a great offensive catcher, you see teams at least give him some breaks. One guy who comes to mind is Salvador Perez in Kansas City. It's been a few years now that they were giving him a lot of DH at bats and even some first base at bats. He still catches, which is, I would say, rare for a guy his age who is a catcher. But he's also been moved around a little bit to spare him that beating you take as a catcher. And so the Mariners so far have not done any of that. I mean, outside of the days, the 1 day a week or 2 days a week that he might DH, I mean, he pretty much catches every day.
Yeah.
And, they're really going to have to think about it. If you see the same usage next year for the Mariners, I guess what I would say to fans is, don't expect them to re-sign this guy, because it seems like they would almost be more content running him into the ground, letting him walk in his free agent years, and then moving on to somebody younger. And whether, no matter how you feel about that, I mean, I would say, if you take the emotions out of it, it's not the worst strategy in the world, especially when you have a catching prospect like Harry Ford coming up. But it's going to be a tough sell on your players. And it's also kind of makes your organization look bad to prospective free agents. It's like, hey, this team is going to come in, use and abuse you, and let you go when your contract comes up.
Yeah. And I think if I was his representation, or almost the Players Association, I'd be looking at the way the Mariners are using him as like borderline abusing his career.
Well,
and I think the other thing is like, they don't really have another option. Garver's not if he goes down, Garver is your everyday catcher, and that's bad, because there's not really another guy who is viable in the organization right now, and Harry Ford is not that guy yet. Sebi Zavala is not that guy. I mean, if that guy was still out there on the free agent market, I would think they would have signed him by now. So it's like that's why to me it's so egregious the way they're using him. Is he's a single point of failure on this team, and there's just no other options out there.
Yeah, I mean they need his bat in the lineup every day, which makes it really difficult to let him have a rest day here and there. But
did I ever talk to you about Brandon Belt on this podcast?
I don't know.
Brandon Belt, I'm just going to bring it up quickly. We can talk about it next week. Brandon Belt is sitting out there as a free agent. Go look at what Brandon Belt did last year. Yeah. There actually is a guy out there if he wants to play baseball still, which maybe he doesn't. The fact that he's not signed with a team, I don't think he signed since maybe he did, but the fact that he isn't maybe means he doesn't want to play baseball anymore. But he was very good last year, and like that would maybe spell giving Raleigh time off by putting someone in who's a viable bat. That seems like an option to me that's worth checking into. But yeah, that's the only thing I'm worried about. We should talk about though. You say one more thing about Raleigh, but we should talk about.
I was just gonna say, like, when we think about overuse of baseball players, we really focus on pitchers. That's become a very common thing, and when you see a guy throw approach 120, unless it's like a no hit bid, people start talking about how irresponsible the handling of a guy like that was. I would say the Astros are a great example of this. The last few years, Dusty Baker's been their manager. He's notoriously a guy that basically runs his pitchers into the ground because he's an old school manager.
I'm curious to hear what you have to say because I've seen some.
Well, they're paying the price this year. I mean, they've had just a rash of injuries among their pitching staff, and a lot of that I would have to imagine is probably because of the way they were used in the past couple of years. And so when we think about, like, we're very cognizant of pitchers being overused, I feel like the Mariners are really testing the limit of how we think about overuse of position players, because we've talked a lot about Mitch Haniger and the way that they kind of ran him into the ground the first half of this season. And now we're already talking about it with Cal Raleigh. And, I think, when Mitch was here on his first contract, before he left or got traded last season or whatever to the Giants, the Mariners had kind of taken that approach with him where they were really running him into the ground in right field, expecting that when his contract came up, they weren't going to re-sign him. That was the thing. So he ends up going to San Francisco, but they were basically content to just let him go because they didn't want to pay a guy that they knew that they had kind of run into the ground. And so it seems like if they do that same thing with Cal Raleigh, I would be really concerned about the way that they just handle position players in general. And I would have to imagine that if you're an agent or anybody representing a player out there, that's something you would become aware of too and pass along to your guy. Like, why would you want to go there if you're a youngster? If you're a guy in the twilight of your career, who really cares at that point? This is your last gasp anyway. But yeah, I think that's kind of the next evolution in baseball, is just being aware of how we use position players, since we're so aware of what we do with pitchers now.
Yeah. Okay, so you brought up a guy that you want to talk about that I think it'll be an interesting conversation. I don't know if we're going to disagree on it. If we disagreed on it, it would be more compelling, but I know my feelings on it already. Give us some information on our final topic before the home run game.
Well, I mean, Victor Robles over the weekend, talked to the media after the game, one of these games. I think it was Sunday. Adam Judah has an article in the Times today, and there's a quote from Robles here, which is pretty interesting. He was asked about what he thought about his time in Seattle so far. He said, "I just like it here. I want to stay here. I like the vibes the fans bring. I just really like Seattle. I would really like to stay here." And as soon as that quote came out, similar to the Cal Raleigh thing, a lot of fans were like, "This is a no-brainer. Lock this guy up long term. Let's sign him. Do whatever it takes." And I don't disagree that it would be nice to keep him here, especially if he keeps playing like this. I think we all think he's going to regress at some point. But, this article from Jude does a pretty good job of breaking down some of the changes that they've made to his game since he's come to Seattle. He is the one guy. He is the hitting coach's one and only success story, and they made some changes to his swing, and it's actually worked. I mean, they're probably as shocked as anybody else. And so, if he keeps playing like this, best case scenario, he keeps playing like he's been playing all the way through the end of the year, and he gets a contract, whether it's from the Mariners or from somebody else. Um, More realistic scenario probably is that he regresses a little bit, and in turn probably brings his value down a little bit, and it becomes easy to re-sign him. But I think the terms of his contract are going to be very interesting.
So yeah, let's talk about who Victor Robles is, because he was like a super prospect with the Nationals when the Nationals were just reeling off super prospects. Obviously, they had Strasburg, Harper, Soto, and then Robles was kind of in that, like, I think maybe even untouchable in trade talks at a point, like a guy who was super high level prospect, and also kind of comes up at the tail end of, I think, when center field defense was like the most valuable. It was kind of like catcher pitch framing when catcher pitch framing took the place of center field defense in our minds. And so we were like, this dude is going to be. So, and then 2019, he actually puts up a respectable season. He's got a 92 WRC plus, 17 home runs, 28 steals, 3.7 wins above replacement, because he also has a very good defensive year, but he just never really hits after that. It never really hit before. I guess he had a brief stretch, 2018, in 66 plate appearances where he was good, but a guy that's putting up WRC plus in the 60s for the next 3 years. And then in Washington this year was struggling, and it leads to what did he get released, and the Mariners picked him up on what was I can't remember.
Yeah, they picked him up for nothing. I mean, he's making the major league minimum. He got effectively cut, and the Mariners scooped him up, and it's been their best move of the year. I mean, as it turns out.
Yeah. So since joining the Mariners, he had a rough stretch. 33 WRC plus with the Nationals to start this year. Since joining the Mariners, he's batting 349, 411, 523, 170 WRC plus. Plays pretty good outfield defense still. 1.3 wins above replacement in only 36 games. So this is a dude, if he's a 4-win player, this is a guy that's worth $25 million a year. I don't think anyone, even if he spends the rest of the season at a 170 WRC plus, I don't think anyone's believing it to the point that he gets $25 million a year. But this to me feels a lot like when Geno Smith was playing well at the beginning of 2022. And I was calling for the Seahawks to extend him, because at a point it was like, just give this guy an extension, because like give him something between backup and starter money, and there's almost no downside. And I kind of feel like if you're the Mariners, you can't pay this, and Geno ends up getting like something like a market level deal. If you're going to pay Victor Robles what becomes like a market level deal for a guy that people feel has upside, that can hit and field, I'm scared as hell of that deal if it's longer than a year.
Well, I think it's going to be, this is why I say it's going to be pretty interesting. I don't think anyone knows exactly how to price this guy, because, usually when you see guys develop like this late, he's 27, I believe. They've either they have no prospect pedigree, or they certainly didn't have the decline that he did leading up to this. Either they've just never really popped, and now they're finally popping, so it makes sense to pay them, or, something else. They haven't been in the majors that long, whatever. But his story is so weird. The fact that he was such a huge prospect, played pretty well in his first season, and then has just been miserable ever since. That you almost don't know, is this all adrenaline? Is this he comes to a new, it's like anybody who starts a new job, right? I mean, it sounds like the end of his tenure in Washington sucked. It sucked a lot.
Yeah.
It's and think about anybody who's ever had a job that they kind of didn't like after a while. It's not only are you disliking your job, but it's really hard to come and perform every day. And I think that's probably a little bit of that going on when he was with the Nats at the end there. And he comes here, just gets a fresh start. Like any of us who have ever started a new job, you come in with a lot of energy, usually work a little bit harder, stay a little bit more focused, and then naturally over time that declines a bit. We all know that. So it's interesting to see, is this going to decline at all for him, or is he just going to really tap into that prospect potentially once had and keep this train rolling? And so I think that's why it's going to be tough to price him out in the offseason. I the guy that comes to mind that I think of, a couple of years ago, the Mariners gave Dylan Moore one of the weirdest deals I've ever seen, which was, I looked it up before, and it was basically comes out to about 3 years and $9 million total. So about $3 million a year. I think Robles would get more than that because A, he plays a premium position where Dylan Moore was like a super sub, and B, the prospect pedigree. Dylan Moore had no prospect pedigree. Obviously, Victor Robles does. But I think what he probably gets is like 2 years, 16 million. Like he's going to have to be on another prove it deal. And the prove it
Sure.
deal is like, if you're giving this to a 27-year-old, what you're basically saying is like, look, dude, you're still hitting free agency again when you're 29. And as long as you keep performing for the next 2 years, you're going to get paid at 29 because you're still in your prime. So it benefits you in that respect. 2 years, 16 is more money than he's ever made. He's been on his rookie contract basically up to this point. So it's, in some ways it's a prove it deal. And I think that's what he's going to be looking at. If you can get Victor Robles for 2 years, 16 million in the offseason, and he, assuming he doesn't dramatically regress down the stretch of this year, I think that makes a lot of sense because you have a need in either of the outfield corners. Your outfield defense has been pretty bad, and he's an okay defender at worst. And if he gets more than that, if you're talking about even like 1 year, 15 million or something like that, a true prove it deal, I just can't imagine he'd get something that much. I can't imagine anyone would pay him that much. And I don't think anyone's locking him up for long term either.
So his salary is 2.65 million this year. 2 years, 16 million is pretty. It's on the verge of scary to me. Yeah. I think that's like a pretty good place to like to set the price at, and I don't. So I think that it's what I would be interested in is if the Mariners jump free agency and they sign him to a shorter, like an extent, whatever it is. Let's say it was 2 years, 8 million, 2 years, 10 million, whatever it is. But before the season's over, you might have a little more leverage because it could continue to fall. It could come crashing down to earth moments after you have him sign that extension. And I'd be interested in that. I think anything more than like 2 years, $12 million or $6 million next year. And I'm like, I agree with you. Plays all three outfield positions fine. Good quality defender at all three positions. The bat is terrifying. There's a bunch of StatCast stats that say he's like doing it through not just luck, but what was the last time we were on? You were Randy Arozarena, like swinging bunts at a single, bunts. And you were like, oh, that's what you got him for. Victor Robles isn't doing that. His barrel rate's super high. He's doing it in ways that like even the hard hit rate isn't that high, but he's barreling the shit out of the ball. So is it a thing? Change of scenery, different coaching, whatever. Did the Mariners unlock something? Is he on steroids? I don't know. I mean, this is like the kind of thing. If this was 2004, we'd be like, this dude's on gear, as they say, as you gym goers say.
I mean, his average in Seattle, I know average is an antiquated stat, but he's got his season average up over 300 now, which is pretty remarkable when you look at his numbers the first half of the year with the Nats. I mean, it's kind of crazy that he's been able to get it back like that. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot to like about Victor Robles for sure. The other thing the Mariners have to think about is they have some really bad contracts on the books for next year. Mitch Garver is getting paid $12.5 million next year. Mitch Haniger is getting paid $16 million last year. I mean, you want to talk about all the mistakes that this front office made. I know they wanted to dump salary with Robbie Ray, and they did it, but they took on bad salary. I mean, at least Robbie Ray is going out there and pitching right now. Mitch Haniger has been a tough watch all season long.
Well, I think since Robbie Ray made his debut, Mitch Haniger has actually been pretty good. I think
it's like he knew. It's like they're kindred spirits or something. But obviously Garver, I mean, at this point, you have to think that $12.5 million is probably a sunk cost. I'm sure they bring him. They let him come out with the team next year, but they're not going to cut him outright. But even still, I mean, what are you going to get out of this guy? Maybe if you can convert him to a full-time backup catcher, then at least you get some value there. But they do have some bad contracts on the books next year, and that makes things difficult. But I mean, what you have in Victor Robles is a guy who actually wants to be here, which doesn't happen a lot.
Well, it's also a guy that a couple months ago didn't think he might have had very many options. So
yeah, I'm sure he's happy. Yeah, as a result. But yeah, I mean, it seems. I guess the testament to the team and the relationship that he has with the Mariners right now is that they actually coached him in a way that we don't often give them credit for. It sounds like they coached him, they fixed some things, and they're actually paying off in games. You always hear about guys who tweak something or did something with the coach, and you might see it pay off in a game for a week or so. It's been working the entire time Robles is here. So, I mean, that's a positive sign. And, it doesn't always work with every guy. You can't get through to every single player. but when you get through to one, you probably don't want to lose that. I mean, think about a guy like we've talked a lot about these guys in the home run game, but guys like Edwin Encarnacion, Jose Bautista, they had the right hitting coach in Toronto who was able to tap into what they had and make them great hitters. Maybe the Mariners can have a success story like that too.
All right, let's play that the home run game you just mentioned. Do you have one ready, or do you want me to?
I'm doing something unprecedented today.
Oh my
I'm going to
God.
give you. This is how confident I am in my abilities. I'm going to give you 2 names, and I'm going to let you pick because I want to watch you agonize over which one to pick. And I'm doing 2 names. It's former Mariner edition.
All right.
Both of these guys are former Mariners. The 2 names, Justin Smoke and Asdrubal Cabrera. And you can pick which one you want.
Wow. I mean, I guess I take. Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna. Now I feel like I don't feel like I'm agonizing, but the more I talk about it, it looks like agonizing.
Talk it through. Think about it. You can do the whole lead up if you want. You can do bios for both of them if you like. You don't have to make a call right away.
Well, so Asdrubal Cabrera was a guy that got that I liked a lot as a prospect, guy that walked and hit for power in the minors, and then. My memory is he either goes. The Mariners had 2 straight trades that turned out real bad. One's like, I think Shin-Soo Choo might have been in one of them, and then Ezekiel Carrera was in one of them, and then Asdrubal Cabrera was in another that brought Ben Broussard and Eduardo Perez here. But that I don't know if Choo was actually in that deal or if he was in a different deal, but. They had a stretch where they just kept getting fucked by the Cleveland, we'll call them Guardians. At the time, they were not the Guardians, but I live in the Pacific Northwest, so let's call them the Guardians. Man. And Smoke comes over, obviously, in the Cliff Lee trade after he comes from Philadelphia, and they end up trading. It was him, Blake Bevan. There was another guy that I can't think of, but is that Hector Noesi? Does he come over in that trade?
So far, here's the thing with the home run game. Not only am I waiting till the end to give you the number, but you've gotten pretty close on a lot of details, but you've missed on some, and I'll just correct them all at the end. It's like on PTI. Remember how they used to
stat boy
at the end, and he was like, "Here's all the things you missed."
Yeah, I feel like Choo and whatever Carrera, whichever one of those it was. Those might have been different deals, but okay, let's go with Cabrera, with Asdrubal Cabrera, because. And my strategy in this is that I think he probably has less career home runs than Justin Smoke, and so I could miss by a larger percentage, and our gross will be. But God, I'm saying he probably comes up in like 2000. Probably makes his debut like 2008, 2009, because my memory is these are like either the end of the Bavasi era or the beginning of the Zarenzik era as GMs. For the Mariners, which would have been when the Perez, and so I assume Cabrera is out of the league now because that's our rule that you try to break every
These
other
are
week.
Both considered retired players. Well, done with Major League Baseball.
Have not played in 2024 at the very minimum. And then I mean, he was like a better hitter than you would have thought, but I don't think he was like pumping out 25 home runs a year. So like, let's say there was a 10-year career in there with I'm going to say Asdrubal Cabrera, 125 home runs.
Okay.
Can I guess Justin Smoke also, just without the lead up? We don't need to.
Yeah. Go ahead.
We don't make you late for Reno.
Go ahead.
I'm going to say Justin Smoke. He had one big year in Toronto, is my memory, and I don't think I'm going to go like 165 home runs for Justin Smoke.
Okay. Yeah. I'll give you both their numbers in just a second.
Thank you.
I'm just going to write down your Smoke answer just so I remember it.
Did I say 125 for Cabrera?
You said 125 for Cabrera, and you said 165 for Smoke, even though that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
The trades you were referencing, yes, at the end of the Bavasi era, they made 2 very bad trades to try and make an ill-fated run for the playoffs. Both trades were with Cleveland. They send Asdrubal Cabrera for Eduardo Perez. They send Shin Soo Choo for Ben Broussard. Ben Broussard had more interest in playing his guitar in coffee shops, and Eduardo Perez had his eyes on the Sunday Night Baseball job at ESPN.
Yeah.
Neither of them really wanted to play baseball anymore, it didn't seem like, and it showed. It showed on the field. Whereas Cabrera and Chu, who were two of the Mariners' top think about that. Like, they traded two of their top prospects for like glorified pinch hitters, basically.
Dude,
like,
I know.
It
It was
terrible
literally
trade.
a DH platoon they traded two top prospects for.
Like, imagine, I guess the modern day equivalent would be like if the Mariners traded Harry Ford for, like, I don't know, who's a platoon player that comes to mind really easily? None of them, obviously.
Mitch Garver.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what
He
it
should
is,
be.
though.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, if they dealt, a guy who's hitting like, if they traded Harry Ford for a guy who's hitting like 250, like a Luke Raley type, like a guy who kind of
Sure.
plays different positions, but really is not a full-time starter. I mean, that's what they did. And not only did they do it, they did it twice, two separate deals with the same team. Just awful. When they called the second time, Cleveland had to be like, they probably didn't say anything. They were like, you tell us, you just tell us, you talk and we'll listen. And I'm sure, yeah, it was just terrible. Bill Bavasi never had a job as a GM again, and he didn't deserve one after that shit.
Yeah.
The Smoke trade that you referenced was with Texas. He comes from Texas. And the pitchers that you're thinking of are Blake Bevan and Josh Lukey, all came with him.
Yeah. So I was saying the Philadelphia trade. I didn't say he came from Philadelphia. Cliff Lee came from Philadelphia, and then they traded him to Texas. I probably didn't say that clearly, but yeah.
Yes.
I was aware that Justin Smoke came from Texas. And
So-
Josh Lukey famously, or maybe not that famously, becomes controversial in Seattle because of his sexual assault conviction, I believe. And
Which the Mariners admitted. They admit later on that they did not know about that when they traded for him.
Which is
Like,
crazy. Also, then after all that controversy, gets traded straight across for one John Jaso, arguably my favorite Mariner since Ken Griffey Jr.
That one worked out pretty well. I mean, Jason catches the Felix.
They never
perfect
figured
game.
out how to use Jaso properly, but yeah, he was very productive in his time as a Mariner.
I will say, for as much as we don't like the Jerry DiPoto regime, Bavasi and Zarenzik were Dumb and Dumber. I mean, they were just
Zarenzik
so
really
bad
came
at their
out
jobs.
so promising though, and they had such a good scouting department back then. Yeah, that was what a brutal way to just absolutely squander an incredible beginning to your tenure.
Yeah, it was rough. It was rough. Now I'm gonna let you in on a little secret here. The reason I picked Smoke and Cabrera and decided to let you pick is because their career home runs are separated by one.
Okay.
They had a single home run difference between them, which you would never think. You would never think that a power hitter like Justin Smoke would effectively have the same number of career home runs as a middle infielder like Asdrubal Cabrera. But you ultimately go with Cabrera, which I kind of hoped you would because I figured that would be a little tougher, and the numbers show that. But not terrible, not terrible. Cabrera, the year that the Mariners trade him 07, he actually comes up right after that with Cleveland. They decided to give him a look in August, September. And so he starts his career in 2007. He's only 21 years old at that point in time. I knew as soon as those guys, I remember thinking this, when they called him up right after acquiring him, I was like, oh shit. We are screwed. They just called up the 21-year-old prospect we traded. That doesn't happen.
Well, especially
not
back
good.
then, there wasn't like now you can get prospect rankings everywhere. Back then, you had to have like a Baseball America or ESPN Insider at the time membership to get like legit prospect rankings. But I liked both those guys as prospects. I was pretty pissed when those trades happened.
It was bad. But you knew it was bad when that happened. Cabrera plays a number of years in Cleveland. He actually made two All-Star teams during his time there in 2011 and 2012. So the start of his career, his early to mid 20s, he's doing great in Cleveland. Then he really bounces around after that. He goes to the Nationals, he goes to the Rays, to the Mets, to the Phillies, the Rangers, the Nationals again, the Diamondbacks, and the Reds all over the course of the next 7 years. He ends up playing a total of 15 years. Though his first season and then, a couple there at the end were abbreviated. So a longer career. I think you said about 10 years on the career. So he has a longer career than one might think.
Sure.
He only has his high water mark for home runs in a season is 25. His 162 game average, however, is 17. So I think he probably hits a little bit more than most people think, because you don't think of a middle infielder like that as a power hitter, but he actually was a pretty good bat. And towards the end of his career, teams were bringing him in and having him play a variety of positions. I mean, he was just kind of he was a hired hitter at the end there. He was so dependable. So you said 125. The number of home runs that he has is actually 195. Smoke
Damn,
was at
quite a bit better than I thought.
196. Yeah, Smoke was
Yeah,
196.
I that's surprising about Cabrera. That's surprising, but also like if you stick around that long, you're gonna put up that many home runs. But I was definitely off on his. I would have guessed his 162 game average was more like 12 or 13. Would have
Let's
been
see
my
if
guess.
let's see if the process would have helped here. What's 17 times 15? No, it wouldn't have helped much.
Yeah.
255. If you would have shaved off the requisites on the ends, then you might actually come up with 195. But yeah, he was pretty good. Pretty good for a lot. I mean, obviously that trade continued to bite the Mariners in the ass until 2021. So.
All right, so mine is not a former Mariner. Mine is I'm debating. I've been debating while we were talking about this who I was going to pick, and maybe I'll give you the other guy next week, and I'll let you know if I do. This one, you might not like this because it's not a guy that was like he played in our time frame, he played in our era of baseball, but he was in his prime probably when you and I started watching baseball. One, Darryl Strawberry.
Okay, Daryl. Yeah, I remember going to the Mariners playoff games in '95 and in the Kingdom, and Daryl was with the Yankees that year, and I think it was '95. It might have been it might not have been the playoff. I might be totally bullshitting. It could have been like '96 or something. But either way, at one point in time, Darryl Strawberry in the mid '90s is playing for the New York Yankees, and this is back in the day when you could still get there and see both teams take batting practice before a game. Now you go, and if you're lucky, you might see the end of the other team hitting. Right. So we're there, and
What happened to that, by the way? Why is that?
I think they just want more time before the game to prep. I would imagine. When you get there 2 hours before the game, if you're just starting batting practice, that's a little abbreviated. You don't have a lot of time to like decompress. So we're there watching BP, and Darryl Strawberry is hitting every ball into the third level in right field at the Kingdom, which is a real shot. I would say it's somewhat comparable to what T-Mobile Park's third level is now. No one hit up there during games too often, right? And every single ball. It's not like he's like hitting a ball to the fence here and there. I mean, it was just home run, home run, home run. It was insane to watch. It was like I still remember it almost 20 years, almost 30 years later. 20 years, almost 30 years later. The image of it still sticks in my mind. And he had such a goofy, long, loopy swing. And obviously at the start of his career, he was a superstar that ultimately had some hard times with drugs and things like that. I can't speak to the start of his career, the early 80s, when I was just being born, I guess. So that's a little unfair, but he's a big enough name.
Darryl Strawberry's career both being born in the early 80s.
Exactly. We didn't start doing drugs at the same time, however, which is good.
Yeah, you beat him by a couple weeks.
Strawberry, man, I know he starts out in I think he's the rookie of the year in '84, I want to say. And he plays until, he's got, there's that abbreviation in the middle when he basically is not doing anything because of the drug abuse. But it's not long. He seemed to find a team. I know in the early 90s, he leaves the Mets and signs a contract or gets traded to the Dodgers, and it's a huge fucking deal. Things don't really go well with the Dodgers. He bounces around a bit. I think he played for the Giants briefly, and then he goes to the Yankees and kind of resurrects his career, I think, at the end with the Yankees. But I can't remember how long he goes. He probably goes longer than I think. He probably keeps playing until 98 or 99 or something, just kind of hanging on as a DH, which means ultimately he plays 15 years with a lot of starts and stops in there. And that's going to make it tough because then it's how many, I'm sure his first few years, he's probably cranking 35, 40 bombs, but those down years are probably pretty down. So his average is probably he's such a part-time player at the end. His average is maybe 25 to 30, even though you'd probably think it'd be closer to 35. I'm going to say 25. I'm going to say he plays Probably plays 15 years, but again, abbreviated. He's got to be in the 300s. Oh, man. I'm going to say 380.
Okay.
Oh, that's bad. That's bad.
Well, I will say you got some. It's not the worst miss ever. Some details you got like remarkably close, and then some stuff that was like, I understand why you would think that, but I bet you remembered it wrong.
Yeah.
So you said 380. That's your number.
Yes.
Give you a little bit about. He does win Rookie of the Year 1983. Plays
3.
17 total seasons. The thing I find, the reason I picked Darryl Strawberry is I didn't think he would be the most difficult. I think the number that I give you and the number you said are both going to be like, I've thought about what if we did this game where you just like say the name, don't go through any process, you have 5 seconds to answer. And I think we probably would have gotten to the same, you would have been in the same 100 range, right? Like in the 300s.
It's never good when you're talking about the 100 range.
But what I'm saying is like, because we think about these in tiers, right? Where you're like,
Yeah.
did he hit 300? You say that almost every week. You're like, did he hit 300? Did he hit 400? Did he hit 500? And I think you'd have guessed he's mid threes, no matter if you had a day to think about it or 5 seconds to think about it, because he played in an era. So interestingly, those first couple of years, he never hits 30 home runs until his 5th season with the Mets. He hits 39 that year, 39 the following year, which leads all of baseball. And that's another thing about his career that you maybe underappreciate a little bit, is how much harder it was to hit home runs back then. So 1988, he's second in MVP voting. He's an all-star for 8 straight seasons, including his first year with the Dodgers, and then it all falls apart. He hits 28 home runs, 1991. Doesn't even hit double digits again until 96 with the Yankees. 98, he hits 24 home runs with the Yankees, and then 99, he limps to the end of his career. Actually, I assume it was injury related. In 66 plate appearances, he puts up 185 OPS plus and 3 more home runs to get him to 335 home runs. What's crazy is not bad. I think you said 25, 162 game average. It's actually 34, but I think it's remarkable how few games he played from 1992 until like 1998. Not only did he never hit 100 games, in only one season did he cross 60 games in that stretch.
Yeah, he was like the original platoon player. I mean, they were like, teams were bringing him in and were like, hey, we got a guy who can hit from the right side just as well. I mean, it was rare to see that in those days, but it felt like that's kind of what teams were doing with him.
But even then, he wasn't like he was pinch hitting it that much or anything like that. He just like did not play a ton. And it's, a guy who was like a super prospect. He's I believe one of the subjects of the book Moneyball. The first couple chapters, they talk about him and Billy Beane being just like super prospects in the Met system.
It's they compare him with another guy too, Cecil Espy. But I think Darryl Strawberry gets a little bit of shout out there too.
Yeah. Which, by the way, if you like the movie, the book is fucking 7,000 times better than the movie.
Have you seen the
movie's appalling in my opinion.
Yeah, it's not great, but it did win an Oscar. Somehow.
I think it didn't win like Best Picture.
Something stupid. I can't
Fuck
remember.
that movie.
Did you see the Dwight Gooden Darryl Strawberry documentary, the 30 for 30? It's pretty good.
No, I'm watching. By the way, we should do documentary talk at the beginning of the next week's episode, because I am watching Charlie Hustle, and you should watch that also because it's pretty
I've seen
good.
That I haven't watched it yet, but
it's Pete Rose. There's not a lot of stones unturned, but I've gotten my wife into, we're watching Hard Knocks and Charlie Hustle, and she's like, with Hard Knocks, she's like, oh, I didn't know all this went into football. She just thought like a bunch of dumbasses showed up every Sunday and like ran into each other.
Hard Knocks is like, I get that they don't really have to promote it or sell it too much because the NFL sells itself, but it's like, It's one of those shows that if you actually start watching it, you're like, oh, this is way more interesting than what I thought it would be. Because me personally, I wouldn't want to watch, I love baseball. I wouldn't want to watch a documentary about spring training in baseball. But that's effectively what Hard Knocks is. But the way that they produce it is what makes it so good.
It's like a nature documentary. Like they build tension perfectly. I will say they're a little heavy-handed on puns and stuff like that, but whatever. Who isn't?
The narration does make it seem like it's like the same guy who does National Geographic shit is narrating this as well. Yeah.
All right, come see me. I'm I'm doing a bunch of comedy. I got a crowd work show at Tacoma Comedy Club. I'm sure we'll be back at Bickerson's Brew House, but in the meantime, go drink their beers. And then I'm headlining, Cole Street Brewing in Enumclaw, Washington. It's rare that we do one early enough in the week, but I'm there on Wednesday, so come check that out. A couple friends of mine on the show, and I've literally, the previous booker of that place, I vowed to never work for him, so I haven't been there in like 4 years. So
Wow.
5 years, probably maybe 6 years. So come on out, Cole Street Brewing, my triumphant return to this comedy show that's existed for a long time, but that I was boycotting for many years. And then Casey McLean Comedy. Also watch my special, over 28,000 views, inching towards 30. Be the 30th thousandth view. Yeah, thanks everybody.
See you next week.
Fucking Alex SSN on Twitter. Don't follow him on Instagram.
You don't have to follow me anywhere. It's fine.